Grünstadt. Pain. Suffering. Fucking... I don't know what else. Okay. Hey everyone, and welcome to Grünstadt, my favorite city that I love and adore. Why did I make it German? Yeah, there you go. This was the plan all along. I've been practicing my German on Duolingo, and I gotta say, Germany, where's my passport? Now to get you all oriented, I want to take you on a quick tour of the city. Off to the very east is our wonderful airport GSX, known for how well it functions. A little to the west is the driving factor of the city's extensive iodine market, conveniently located next door to Blightville, the city's only agricultural district. I'm sure nothing will go wrong there.
Yes, this all looks nominal.
I've wanted this my whole life.
Up north we have the refinery, which, let's be honest, I was never going to finish. That's right, I put more effort into making Chengdu the default dance than I did with a major economic drive. Just a little west of the center of the map, we have our core. My favorite citizens live here. Leighton Wright, Kirkland Signature, and former conservative Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Joseph Harper, who now works at Hoffman Electric. Today, I've decided to spend non-existent taxpayer funds on a brand new spaceport off to the east of the mountain. Alright, so the first thing for me was to figure out how I was actually going to connect that entire facility to the rest of the map, and I decided that that was going to be just a road that comes off of Blightville and goes through the mountain off to the east side. It's just basically a huge tunnel, and since it's this one connection, apart from a rail connection I add later on, it ends up being a really great security checkpoint because everybody comes through there. So I ended up detailing this with a nice tunnel portal and some guard booths so that it would look like a proper security checkpoint. So when I originally had this idea, like a year ago, I wanted this facility to be able to land space shuttles. And the thing about space shuttles is that they require really, really long runways. And the only way I would be able to fit it is by putting it straight through the mountain. So that's exactly what I did. Half of it is on the outside, half of it is on the inside of the mountain, but not really. I just cut it off and then cover it up. The runway itself was a lot easier to make than what I did for GSX. It uses one network for the runway, and then I have a bunch of shoulder networks and surface networks to create this concrete sort of apron. And then, like I said, I was covering up the rest of it. So I used procedural objects to scale up this big tunnel portal from Ronix, and then I added a bunch of hangar doors, also from Ronix, to actually hide that terrain from the inside. You're going to see me use a lot of procedural objects in this video. I use them for pretty much everything, including this, which is me just clipping a bunch of buildings together next to this tunnel, because the rest of the runway goes into the mountain. And so then in that case, there would be like a big underground facility or something like that. And I thought I could work on that, but I don't really care about that as much. I didn't end up developing on that idea a lot. So I sort of just gave the appearance of there being an underground facility, because you can't really make an underground facility in City Skylines anyways. So and then I put down a bunch of those lights because they look cool. That was that was pretty much the only reason. What was really interesting to me when working on this was how much better the airport assets have gotten. At GSX, I spent so much time working on those runways. They use so many assets, so many props and lights and decals, and it's crazy. And here, this entire runway took me maybe 3 hours at tops. The lighting system I did copy from GSX. It's ALSF2, I think. And then I basically supported the rest of it with these breakwaters that jut out from the rest of the runway. All right, now to the good stuff. I needed a launch tower, and so I did that by taking this Bay Bridge pillar, I think it's by Besquijkelhausen, and scaling it so that it had a square base, and then I added this big concrete pad on top to cap it off. And the lightning rod is just this big antenna from Ronix that I also scaled up. And it ends up working perfectly. I had the Falcon Heavy there on the side, just so I get the scaling right. And it looks exactly like it should. The launch pad was actually really interesting to build because all it really is a big raised block of concrete, right? But it does have a very specific shape. Like if you look at KSC from Google Earth, they have a pretty distinct shape. It's sort of octagonal, and that's given by the embankments on either side that slope down to the ground. And so the way I replicated that is by using these slope profiles. But you can't really get those sharp corners if you have a bunch of segments that are connected together. So the way I got around that is just by splitting up the segments into different pieces. Something else that I don't get to use too often are particle effects, and that's generally just because they're not really applicable to the things that I build. But in this case, I could use them for some nice, what are they called, condensation clouds, like if the engine is being chilled or when it's being loaded with propellant. So that was really cool, and it really adds to the character of the build. And then right here, I'm just creating this, I guess it's a support structure for the strong back when it comes up here to erect the Falcon Heavy. And it has a pretty distinct shape just because the exhaust from the engines has to be directed into the flame trench. So procedural objects was pretty much my only option there. When you look at pad 39A today, the crew access arm really stands out. So I wanted to include that too, just because I guess crewed missions from this pad would be possible. And I just used some jetways from Vazimir and it came out looking really nice. So I forgot to mention that I actually had the embankments a little bit wrong. Basically what I had to do is extend it all the way out to the horizontal integration facility, which is basically just a big warehouse that I scaled up with procedural objects. And that basically fixed the grade, because the grade I had was way too steep. And then added some rails that the strong back actually moves along. That's pretty much the main stuff. After that, it was just fleshing out the area. So you can see I already have a water tower there for the deluge system, and that was it's a fun little detail because it's a big starship. They actually hired a bunch of people who make water towers to make the starships, because just welding those big rings together. So that's a neat little detail. And these are RP1 tanks that I just scaled lengthwise. And earlier I put down, I think that was a liquid oxygen tank, and I just dragged some network pipes from that to the actual launch pad. Something else that I finally had the opportunity to use are these awesome North American railroad tracks by Tim the Terrible, because there wasn't really a situation where they were applicable before now, but here I'm trying to make like my own version of the NASA railroad. So it was perfect, and they're really detailed. I didn't have a chance to use them for my other railway projects and stuff like that. Plus, they're not as versatile. They don't have as many different networks as the railway mod, but still, you know, in this case, I didn't really need that. I just needed a nice set of tracks that I could use to move heavy things, I guess, around this facility. So just real quick, what you saw me add here is the strong back, which is what takes the horizontal rocket and puts it vertical on the pad. And that's not on the workshop, so I asked Yakudami, who made a bunch of the other SpaceX assets, including the Falcons. And in no time at all, he delivered this fantastic model, so a huge thank you. I have a lot of empty, unused space around the pad, and that's a big no-no. Like, you want some detail. So a technique I like to use is to take a resource brush. In this case, I used oil because I have a nice texture that looks like dry grass. I paint some of that in, and then I erase some of it away. And then with Move It, you take some foliage, and you just plop it around everywhere, and it's perfect. And last but not least, I had to crown this area with a nice Tesla in the fairing. I still remember watching the first Falcon Heavy take off live. Like, that was insane. I can't even describe how cool that was. So I'm really happy I got to recreate that a little bit in City Skylines. So we have the launch pad, and now we need the landing pad zone thing. And this is pretty straightforward. I have my landing zones that I made a way back, so I finally found a use for them. I use some pedestrian paths to create an outline, and then I fill it in with a ring of surface networks. And I did make all of my landing zones into procedural objects so I can tweak the color and size a little bit. Detailing these isn't really anything crazy. I put down some concrete brushes, and then I used Surface Painter to fill it in. And I used the technique where I use foliage and a resource brush just to quickly add detail around the area. and added some little workers inspecting the side booster too. So yeah, it came out looking pretty much perfect, and that almost wraps it up for all of the rocket side of things. So I think this next build is very interesting, and for a number of reasons. This was actually suggested to me by Vasimir, and I'm glad I did it. And this Hyperloop network came out at the perfect time too. This is a mass driver, which is basically a huge catapult that launches things into orbit. It's very, it's pretty cool, and I think it solidifies Grünstadt as being in the near future. You know, it's a cool little sci-fi sort of build. And yeah, the Hyperloop network by Citywall came out at the perfect time. It's the perfect thing for this. It was a little hard to get in the right shape just because of the way that nodes and segments work, but I think I got it close enough. And of course, using procedural objects again, I made these cool pillars that stand out and support this whole launch structure. And of course, I can't go more than a couple of seconds without using some of Ronix's concrete blocks. And this is, I guess, the foundation structure that the Hyperloop mass driver goes into. Obviously, this isn't functional, but I mean, it looks cool, which is all I really need. And it's part of, I guess, the underground complex thing that I have going on, because the rest of it would be in the mountain. And something I tried to add to make it more apparent that there was this underground portion of this build is by adding these exits in a few spots on the mountain with a vent next to them. And I think these are the dry storage nuclear caskets or something, whatever they're called. So they're not really an exit, but I slapped a door prop onto them, so now they are. And this cool fan that spins, and it has steam coming out of it for whatever reason. Now, I didn't show it, but I realized that I hadn't defaced the top of the mountain enough, so I actually placed down a huge radio antenna on top of it. So that's broadcasting ASMR all over the entire city now. Now, something as beautiful as this mass driver Hyperloop thing, of course, needs to be lit up from the bottom. So I put down a whole bunch of spotlights alongside these pillars, and it looks great at night now. You know, you have these nice highlights on the bottom. I don't know if you remember, but I actually destroyed the cruise port that I had near downtown. And this isn't a cruise port either, but it is a port. And segue. Basically, I needed a spot for the autonomous spaceport drone ship to come back with the landed booster. And that's done at a port, so I needed a port here. So I decided we could have a container port here, since it's, you know, right next to Blightville, and that's a farm area. You know, you could have it's not in a horrible place. It's not in the best place, but I think it makes sense. It's okay, basically, to have a container port here. And so that's what I'm doing. There's some big terminal cranes. I put down a bunch of these tiles by Vasimir. Yeah, I'm pretty sure these are by Vasimir too. The big concrete slabs are really just there for this, you know, portion of land right next to the quay, because it gets really distorted, the terrain. And I don't know if you've ever worked with the terrain in City Skylines, but it's not exactly the best. So this is sort of my compromise. You could use a road too, or, you know, some what are they called? Terrain networks. There's so many things now, I don't even know. But yeah, you could flatten it out with like a network. I decided to go with the tiles to hide it, plus it's an extra bit of detail, and then the rest can just be surface painter. And then of course I'm using these breakwaters again, because they're really easy to shape, they're modular, so they're pretty perfect for this kind of application. And I'm just creating this portion that's lower to the water where the drone ship can dock a little bit more flush with the port. Ports were always that kind of thing for me that were not, you know, that easy to get right the first time. And I'm pretty proud with how this one came out, because I mean, it did take me a while, but the level of detail that I put into it and how it came out, I'm really happy with. So that's great. And you can see here that the ASDS is now like pretty level with this, with the breakwaters that I put here. So that's essentially what I was doing, just trying to make it lower because my terrain, I guess, is either too high or my sea level's too low. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. This is a solution. This works. This crane was too small, so I downloaded a sub to a different one. It's not, you know, the exact thing I'm looking for, but whatever, close enough. So this is like the last little bit of rocket related stuff, I guess, in this episode, which is great. You know, I'm really happy with the amount of stuff I was able to fit in. This entire episode has basically just been me fanboying over SpaceX. But I think it's great. I think this whole thing came out great. It's realistic, I think, at least to some extent. And let's be honest, it just looks really nice. I mean, I wish I could do something as ambitious and amazing as the Mars project by Citywalk. I mean, that entire series blows my mind. Every time I see an episode, I'm just shocked because I'm like, oh my God, I never thought of that, and all these new assets. But I'm you know, I like doing more, I guess, literal down-to-earth stuff. Like this is, you know, actual space-related activity that you'd see going on today, and I think that's very... Yeah, so at about this point, my game stopped working, and I couldn't really figure out why. It was, you know, quite a setback because I didn't save, and this was right after I did a whole bunch of detail work on the port. So, you know, it was a little bit annoying, but ultimately it was okay because I had some help from some great folks on the City Skylines Discord server, and Alistria in particular really bared with me through all of this. And in the end, it turns out the problem was a custom light effect that I downloaded. It was a lighthouse prop because I wanted a lighthouse at the port. So yeah, that was a little bit annoying. Let me ask you a question. Do you want your life to get better or worse or stay the same? And if you answered any of those, all of those, or none of those, then you should join the Discord server. That's right, I'm an amazing salesman. You have no choice now because of my amazing sales pitch. I will be having competitions, probably, sooner or later, or never, and you should post amazing memes because I have like 2 active people right now, and all of their memes are terrible. Please prove to me that you are better than them because I believe in you. Please join the Discord server. The link is in the description. Do it, please join. The last thing I built is this viewing platform where people could come to watch launches or just appreciate the view. And I had a lot of creative freedom when making this because it's all just props and decals and procedural objects. So I could really build whatever I want. And in particular, I had this focus on making this area look great at night because in my mind, I imagined that, you know, in the days, it's a good place to go to look out over the view. But then at night, it's more cozy and you have this restaurant where you could dine among the stars. So I paid a lot of attention to props that have lights, and the trees are all illuminated and everything. This episode, for me, was really fun to make because like I was saying before I got interrupted by my game crashing, I really enjoy building things that are original but still grounded in reality. And that's sort of what Grünstadt is all about, because I say it's in the near future, but all that is really is a way for me to get more creative freedom and be able to build things that might not necessarily be common today or exist everywhere, but could still technically work. If you have any suggestions or thoughts about this video, please don't hesitate to leave a comment or hop onto the Discord server. I'm usually pretty active there, and I'd be more than happy to have a chat. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Осень в небе, жгут корабли,